So I had to split this section off from the original video just because there was a lot of information to cover. This isn't a master's guide or a professional guide on how to play Cagliostro. I'm going to go over a lot of ideas and interesting things that I found while messing around with the character and playing her. The point of this video is to more show you what she's capable of and give you some decent ideas to transition into an intermediate playstyle. I will show you some stuff that you can definitely use, but a lot of the stuff I will show you with Cagliostro specifically is going to be very open-ended just because she's a very high skill cap character, and if I really wanted to cover like all the setups and all the advanced things that you can do with the character, it's going to take far longer and it's out of the scope of the video. Anyways, we'll get right into the intermediate section. Now getting into the intermediate section, I do want to cover more interesting tools. Her game plan is just that simple that I've shown in Super Beginner and Beginner. It's just like 6XL's super basic pressure, but the main ideas I want you to pick up here is how to end it. The main tricky part of Cagliostro is not necessarily her pressure or anything, but it's her setups. I think a lot of people understand this, but they don't realize that it makes her offense somewhat simple until you set up, obviously. So we're going to start going over tools and ways you can actually set up a pretty offensive pressure or like a suffocating trap setup, starting with like key normals. The two key normals I want to talk about are 6XH, throw. So throw, I already kind of said it's a good tool, but the reason why I want to emphasize it even more is because you can do some tricky setups or start playing with some tricky setups that utilize throw. You can even use back throw. So for example, if you have your trap set up here and you do a back throw, it'll actually hit them into the traps, allowing you to do a combo afterwards. Another thing to note is we haven't really talked about air traps, but we do have air traps. And if you throw the opponent, you can actually throw them into an air trap, and depending on the distancing, you will be able to combo. If it's too close like that, you won't get a combo, but if it's a little bit further like this, you can run up and then do a combo afterwards. So you can get pretty tricky with how you set up your traps and then pressure your offense. An idea, for example, is if you're back here in the corner, you can jump an air trap and then you have a huge threat for throw. So if they ever get thrown, they just get comboed. We'll get into that a little bit more afterwards, after I talk about how to set up air traps a bit more. But I just want you to know that throw is a very good way to actually set up your traps or throw into your traps. 6XH, I just mentioned it, but it's also, as you can see, it displaces the opponent. So what you can do is if you have like traps here and you want a way to start your offense, instead of just doing a 6XL and pushing them to the corner, you can kind of use this as a side swap and push them into the trap. So if I have a trap here and then I do this, I can run up and do 6XL and start my pressure. So there's a lot of ways to start from like the zoning game plan and then start running up and then start using your tools to actually start pressure. As far as air buttons, because you will need to use these, I would say your best one is probably just jumping L. It does give plus frames on block, so it is your turn and it's pretty easy to use, and some of your skills will position you in a place where L is going to be your best button to actually hit, which we'll get into pretty soon. But that's kind of all I wanted to cover for new key normals. As far as key specials, this is where things are going to get a little bit complicated. We have air traps that I just kind of mentioned, and it doesn't matter which version you use in the corner really, because it places it in on top of them, but in the mid screen, the medium version will place it really far behind, like pretty much behind the opponent, where the light version will put it like right in front. So it's a good way to kind of lock down the opponent's options of jumping over floor traps, for example. But I would say it's a little bit finicky to use just because of how the distancing is relative to you. Sometimes if you're a little too close, it might just go right behind them. So just get kind of used to it. It's a very good tool, but in the corner, it's a crazy tool. So like if you're doing that pressure string I said earlier with like auto combo into U into H, you can jump and then place a air trap right on top of them if you think they're not going to try to take their turn back. And then you can kind of like either run in or place another trap at their feet and then kind of run in. So there's like ways to just like throw an air trap above them so they can't jump out of the corner. And like I said before, if you're doing the block string into U into H, you can do like block string into U into H into rock throw, and that's kind of how you condition them not to move. And then you can do that air trap because they're not going to move because they think you're going to throw the rock. And then you can start doing your pressure again. Or you can just like throw a trap right in front of them with far trap, which is medium plus special, so that they don't run up. Or if you think they're going to run up, you can either do that or like a close one depending on how comfortable you are or the timing in which they start running up. You can work around it and trap around it. So I highly recommend start playing with this, especially in the corner with this pressure. I will get into other ways you can mix the jump back, because it would be a bit obvious if that was the only thing you could do, if you just jump back and then they know you're doing a trap. So I will show you other ways to use the jump to mix it up. EX trap is actually a pretty good tool, especially in the corner, because it will give you those plus frames and set a trap here. So I do want you to use, like in the mid screen, use it a bit less, use EX trap a bit less, and start using it more like in the corner. So you do like EX trap, of course at like a certain distancing, so like do U into EX trap instead of H. So you can start mixing up your pressure as well. So you can do like block string into U into EX trap, and boom, you have more plus frames and you have a trap setup. You can start threatening back throw with some trap setups. It'll be a little bit finicky because the distancing does matter. You can always just do EX trap after the H follow up as well, just to get those traps out. You just kind of want to mix up how your pressure string is so that you can get more traps or more things out, forcing the opponent to kind of respect your offense. Talking about the jump moves, we have some moves in the air that are actually pretty good. I haven't really talked about TP, but we do have a TP. Jump TP is actually a pretty good way just to go right above them and then get it overhead. If you're doing that block string and now you're back out here and you want to set an air trap, you can instead mix it with just air TP into overhead, so that if they try to kind of take their turn back or try to run in, you do TP on their head. It's a pretty good way to threaten your approach. I do want to preface this, just because it is a little bit slow, you kind of want them to be a little bit conditioned from the rock throw so that they don't react immediately. Instead, they kind of try to react depending on what you do afterwards. So just use this sparingly, I would say, because worst case scenario, you're going to be ending up in the corner and they're going to be running under you. So definitely mix up this approach, but it is a good approach to consider, considering that it gives you your overhead L and plus frames or even frames. So jump rock itself is actually a pretty decent tool. Since it goes at this diagonal angle, you can just like jump and kind of immediately do it since they're in the corner, and it will hit them. And if they try to run up during that time, they will get hit by the rock, meaning you get positive frames, and then you can kind of run in. It does depend on rock level, so like level 1 rock doesn't do too much, but it does hit the opponent. Or level 2 already starts giving you plus frames. So just keep that in mind. The other tool that I notice a lot of really good Cagliostros use a lot is their jumping 50%, jumping down 50%, which we'll talk about more in the meteor usage section. But for now, I do want you to get used to using this move. The air version is quite good, where the ground version is just your invincible reversal. The air version, on the other hand, is also invincible, but it has this property where it TPs you right on top of them. So on block, you can just immediately go into a L. The other thing is, in the mid screen, it changes a little bit, where instead it TPs you to the other side. So it's a knowledge check move as well. So after you do this, you can just instantly go into a L, and if they're not blocking both sides, they will get hit by the second one, and you'll be on offense again. So it's a very good move just to throw out, and even up close it's pretty decent just because it's invincible. Yeah, just keep that tool in mind. Also, as you saw there, your down EX TP, it does have invincibility and gives you +2, so it's not a bad way to kind of use it in the corner. The reason why I didn't mention this in the previous sections is because it's a little bit tricky to use, and I really don't want newer players to try to abuse invincible moves too much, because it does build bad habits, especially when she doesn't have a traditional DP that kind of hits them off. So I don't want them to be over reliant on this tool and instead focus on more fundamentals and basics. But it is something to keep in mind that you can use it. The only issue is like if it doesn't hit, which it has a very close hitbox, you just get blown up. So it's a little bit tricky to use, which is also a reason why I want it to, as you saw, I was very close and it still didn't hit. You have to like pretty much be touching for it to actually get those +2 frames. So it is kind of interesting tool to use, and it's a good way to get out of the corner, but just be careful that like any button will literally space you too far to actually get the positive frames. I don't see many high level players really use this movement too much, nor do I see them use the EX version as kind of like a reversal option. So just keep that in mind. Your more consistent option is definitely your 50% TP, which is this. It basically functions more similarly to a traditional metered reversal, where if they block it, you kind of get blown up, and if they don't, it's a very good get off me tool. Getting into even more interesting stuff that I saw was, this is kind of out of the scope of the video, but I do want to show this. If the opponent has a trap behind them and they throw break, it'll actually push them into the trap, giving you positive frames, allowing you to start your pressure. If you put traps down after like some setup, or like combo or setup, or maybe you side switch and the traps are now like on this side. So like let's say you put EX traps and for some reason you side switch, maybe you used the 50% TP. Now if they throw break, they will get pushed into the traps, and on hit, obviously you get a huge combo. So those are some interesting ideas to work with. Another thing is, if the opponent, for example, has a trap behind them and you guard break, so there's some guard break setups, you can actually push them into the trap and it's unblockable essentially. So if they get hit by the guard break, there's nothing they can really do to actually get out of it. They have to dodge the guard break. So you can do some combos into setups where you do guard break right after, and I'm pretty sure you can combo off of that as well. The main thing to know about this one is they can dodge it, of course, so it is a little bit risky, but depending on how you develop this character, you can or most likely find setups that allow you to just do guard break safely by mixing it with other options, like maybe mixing it with a high-low, or mixing it with left-right, or mixing it with whatever you want. Overall, I just want you to like keep in mind that anything that allows you to have pushback on this character will basically allow you to push them into traps. So just keep that in mind when you're making setups or when you're experimenting with this character on your own. I recommend just kind of sticking to the game plan that I've kind of laid out. I've been watching a lot of high level Cagliostros and kind of taking notes, and a lot of them stick basically to this very simple plan, and on occasion they'll do more complicated setups or something. This game at the current state is very pressure based, so keeping your pressure is like the most important thing, and these setups should come secondary. So as you get better at the character, you can develop the character into a setup demon, but for now try to just focus on the fundamentals of the game and what's important of the game, which is meter usage and like pressure into like traps to be oppressive, or a pressure into rock. But that's kind of basically the idea with Cagliostro. I would talk more about Cagliostro, but honestly her toolkit is pretty simple. We kind of went over everything. The reason why at the beginning of the video I said she has an extremely high skill cap is, as you can see, I didn't cover that much compared to some other characters like Vera, but just the amount of things you can do with just a basic understanding of the character is crazy. So you can be very creative. Just mix it up, make sure to use your traps, air trap on occasion. Your fuller traps I feel like are much more valuable to force them to jump, and then you can 2H them. Rock is pretty good. Don't over rely on rock. Rock is not your win condition. Your win condition is putting traps, but rock is a pretty good tool to like start developing pressure. So like if you're doing pressure and over time you're getting a rock because you're not using it and you're using your other options, you can instead throw a rock, and then now you have plus frames to start pressure again, and then you can start doing traps again. So try to keep the game plan pretty simple. You can get pretty complicated with like throw setups, even throw break setups, with guard break setups, and so on. Just to show the hit confirm one more time, you want to do something like this into your quarter circle back spin. The reason why I haven't really talked about quarter circle back spin is just because overall it's kind of a wonky tool to use. You can only use it really at like tip ranges, and even then it's finicky. Because at tip ranges it's safe, but it puts the opponent on offense, so it's kind of a bad tool to use in my opinion. I feel like at tip range it should maybe be even at least, because this as an approach tool is pretty bad and finicky. You have to be at very specific ranges, and if you whiff you die, and if you hit you're on defense, which as Cagliostro is not good. And then the EX version is okay, but you are -3 and in their face, so you lose your turn, and as soon as they start their pressure with 6XL, things get really tough. You basically have to, depending on the character or matchup, you basically have to just use 50% meter just to get them off of you, and even that's risky because they can block it and kill you. So that's kind of why I didn't talk about it. TPs, you can use TPs to do some tricky movement. A lot of Cagliostro players that I've watched don't really use this as much. They use it maybe as like a left-right mix-up tool every once in a while, but it's not like integral to your game plan. So focus more on like traps and rock and forward L, forward medium. Speaking about meter usage, very briefly, we already went over 50% meter, and this is pretty important to like your general game plan. I didn't really want to talk about any other 50% options just because this one is just so good compared to the other ones, but there is one that I really want to mention actually, which is your 50% forward special. The reason why this is good is not because you can use it in neutral, it's actually what it does on hit. So as a combo ender, especially even in mid screen, it's very good because you can do this into like some trap setups because they're still getting up. So it's a good way to actually end combos mid screen, and I most likely won't include any combos that do this mid screen. I don't know, we'll see, but it is quite an advanced tool to use, so please start doing your own research if you really want to use it. 50% down special is just so good. I would say just use this or keep it most of the time, especially even on defense. For now, just use this until you're comfortable with her general game plan, and then you're very much comfortable to just go past it.